Okay, let's dive right in. The news that's really the focus for our deep dive today is the passing of Phil Robertson.
Yeah, the figure most people know as the patriarch of the Duck Dynasty family.
Exactly.
And the news came out Sunday, May 25th, 2025, announced by his family he was 79.
Right, 79. And so what we're doing here is taking the sources you've given us. We've got news articles, a biographical entry, and we're going to try and, unpack the life and legacy of this really notable figure.
And sometimes controversial, as the sources definitely point out.
Yeah, that too.
So our goal, our mission with this deep dive is basically to go through these materials, pull out the key moments, the achievements, the challenges, everything the sources present.
To help you get a well-rounded picture fast without needing to sift through all the articles yourself.
Exactly. We'll look at his roots, his pretty unexpected path from like football star potential to inventing duck calls.
And then, of course, the huge reality TV fame.
Right. And the different sides of his public image, including, the controversies that the sources definitely highlight.
Okay, so let's start with the announcement itself, the recent context. It came from his daughter-in-law, Corey Robertson, Willie's wife.
That's right. The articles quote her Facebook post. She shared the news saying, we celebrate today that our father, husband, and grandfather, Phil Robertson, is now with the Lord.
And the sources said she also thanked people.
Yes, she thanked supporters for, and this is a quote, the love and prayers of so many whose lives have been impacted by his life, saved by grace, his bold faith, and by his desire to tell everyone who would listen the good news of Jesus.
Now, the sources also mention his health leading up to this. That wasn't totally unexpected, was it?
No, not entirely. It's noted he was diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease in 2024.
Oh, okay.
And this was something the family had actually discussed publicly on their podcast, Unashamed, with the Robertson family. His son Jace mentioned the, early stages back in December 2023. And then there was an update in April this year where Jace said they were basically making him comfortable.
Gotcha. And the details around his death. Died May 25th, 2025, age 79. Location was West Monroe, Louisiana.
Correct, West Monroe. One source did mention a photo location in Alabama, but the death location seems consistently listed as West Monroe.
Okay.
And while the specific cause of death wasn't revealed in one article, it does connect it to the health issues following the Alzheimer's diagnosis. Makes sense.
Yeah, it does. And funeral plans.
The sources say the family's planning a private funeral service, but there will be a public celebration of life planned for later on.
Okay, so let's step back from the immediate news. Let's rewind, look at his beginnings. The sources paint a picture of a really rugged star.
They really do. Born Phil Alexander Robertson, April 24th, 1946, in Vivian, Louisiana, fifth of 7 kids.
And the living conditions sound pretty basic.
Extremely basic. The material mentions no electricity, no indoor toilet, not even a bathtub. The family lived off the land, garden, hunting, raised animals. Very self-sufficient.
There's a quote from him about that time, isn't there? Something about the 1850s.
Yeah, it really captures it. He said, "It was the 1950s when I was a young boy, but we lived like it was the 1850s. But we were always happy, 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 no matter the circumstances."
Happy, happy, happy. That became kind of his catchphrase later, didn't it?
It sure did, and it really shows how that early life shaped his perspective.
Which makes his next chapter, the athletic stuff, kind of surprising, given that background.
Definitely. The sources highlight he was a standout athlete in high school, all-state in football, baseball, and track.
Quite the trifecta.
Mhm.
And that led him to Louisiana Tech for football.
Yep, played quarterback there in the late 60s. And here's a key detail the sources emphasize. He was first string.
Ahead of someone pretty famous, right?
Ahead of Terry Bradshaw, future NFL Hall of Famer.
No kidding.
Yeah, and Bradshaw apparently had something to say about Phil's priorities even back then.
Oh, what did he say?
Bradshaw's quoted saying something like, "Phil loved hunting more than football. He'd show up to practice straight from the woods. Squirrel tails hanging out of his pockets, duck feathers."
Seriously.
That's the quote in the source. Bradshaw added, "Clearly he was a fine shot, so no one complained too much." It really shows where Phil's passion was.
And that passion led to a massive decision, according to the sources. Turning down the pros.
It did. He reportedly declined a recruitment offer to play professionally for the Washington Redskins.
Why?
Because football season clashed with duck hunting season.
He literally chose ducks over bucks.
That's exactly how he put it. The quote attributed to him is, "Terry went for the bucks and I chased after the ducks."
Incredible. But he did finish his education.
Yes, he did. got a bachelor's degree in physical education and then a master's in education.
So after college, degrees in hand, what was the path before Duck Commander took off?
Well, it wasn't a straight line to business mogul. The sources say he spent several years teaching first.
Okay, teacher.
Then he shifted gears, became a commercial fisherman for a while. The material also mentions a rough patch in the 70s. His marriage was strained, and he was apparently running a bar in 1975.
Hmm. So some struggles there before the big success.
Seems like it. It adds some, depth to the story before the public persona really formed.
And all circles back to that hunting passion, the thing that made him turn down the NFL.
Mhm.
That's what led to Duck Commander.
Exactly. He was an avid duck hunter, obviously, and just wasn't happy with the duck calls on the market. He thought he could do better, make something more realistic.
So he started tinkering.
That's the story. Began experimenting, invented his first Duck Commander call in 1972, and then incorporated the company in 1973.
From a personal project in the early 70s.
To a multi-million-dollar business. It's now run by his son, Willie Robertson. Quite the journey for a duck call.
But most of us, myself included probably, didn't really know the name or the family until much later, right? The TV show?
Oh yeah, absolutely. The widespread fame came with A&E's Duck Dynasty. The sources put its run from 2012 to 2017, 11 seasons.
Wow, 11 seasons. And the show was basically just following their lives.
Pretty much.
Hmm.
Following the family, Phil, his wife, Miss Kay, the sons, Jays, Willie, Jep, grandkids, key employees like Cy, just their daily lives running the Duck Commander business.
And it just exploded.
Mhm.
Made them household names, brought that whole world, the humor, the faith, the hunting, into millions of living rooms.
Definitely. And the sources note he did other media things too, sort of during and after the show's peak. He was in a Steve Bannon film called Torchbearer.
Yeah.
He joined CRTV for a show called In the Woods with Phil in 2017. And there was that biographical movie, The Blind, just last year in 2023, focusing on his early life.
Right, The Blind. And the material also mentions another show is actually in the works.
Yeah, Duck Dynasty. The revival,
Yeah.
set to air this summer apparently, though obviously it will be without its patriarch now.
That'll be different. Moving on to his personal life, his foundation, his marriage to Miss Kay seems central in the sources.
Very central. Married Marcia Miss Kay Carraway in 1966. They were high school sweethearts, met back in '64.
But the sources are pretty upfront about some early difficulties.
They are. They mention a period in his 20s, describing it as a sex, drugs, and rock and roll lifestyle, which apparently put a huge strain on the marriage. But the sources also credit a major religious awakening he had with turning things around, helping him overcome those issues and save his marriage.
And later on, their relationship is described as long-standing, rock solid.
Yeah, that's the phrase used. And his faith, his Christian faith, is presented as like a constant thread throughout his public life.
Very outspoken about it.
Extremely. Member and elder at the White's Ferry Road Church of Christ, the sources consistently highlight how vocal he was about his beliefs.
And that often intersected with politics. The sources detail his public stances and endorsements over the years. Again, just reporting what the material says.
Right. Impartial reporting here. The sources state he opposed abortion, spoke out on it. He endorsed several Republican candidates, Vance McAllister in Louisiana back in 2013, Ted Cruz and then Donald Trump in the 2016 presidential race, and Roy Moore in Alabama's 2017 Senate race.
And there was something about a fight for the court project.
Yes, the sources mentioned he took over chairmanship of that project in late 2016 or early 2017 related to judicial appointments.
Got it. And one more recent personal detail the sources include, something about discovering a daughter.
Yeah, that's in there. In May 2020, he apparently learned he had a daughter named Phyllis from an affair back in the 1970s.
Wow. And how did that resolve?
The sources state he embraced her, welcomed her into the family.
Okay, now we have to address the controversies. The sources you shared dedicate significant space to public statements he made that caused major backlash.
They do, and it's really important we stress this. We're just summarizing what the sources report, what they say he said and what they say the consequences were. We're not endorsing or judging the views themselves.
Absolutely. Neutral reporting of the source material. So, the big one seems to be the GQ interview in 2013.
That was definitely a flashpoint.
What exactly do the sources say happened? What was he asked? And what did they report as his response about sin?
According to the articles covering the interview, when GQ asked him what he considered sinful, his reported response began, Start with homosexual behavior and just morph out from there.
Okay.
He apparently continued, listing other behaviors, paraphrased a Bible passage about who wouldn't inherit God's kingdom, and made comments questioning the physical appeal of same-sex relationships versus heterosexual ones, specifically mentioning anatomy.
And did the sources explain how he framed those comments? Like his perspective on judgment?
Yes, the material indicates he followed up by saying he doesn't judge, that's for God. He's quoted in the sources as saying something like, we just love them, give them the good news about Jesus, whether they're homosexuals, drunks, terrorists. We let God sort them out later. You see what I'm saying?
Okay. So what happened immediately after that interview came out, according to the sources?
A&E, the network for Duck Dynasty, reacted quickly. The sources report they suspended him from the show indefinitely.
Suspended him. And a reaction to that?
A huge backlash, but from his supporters this time. The articles mention a massive Facebook support page, statements from political figures defending him and criticizing A&E, a lot of public pressure.
And the outcome?
A&E reversed course pretty quickly. The sources say they lifted the suspension just 9 days later.
9 days, okay. The sources also point to comments made at CPAC, the Conservative Political Action Conference, in 2015. What did the material report there?
Two main things stand out in the reporting. First, he apparently asserted that STDs, sexually transmitted diseases, were the legacy of groups like Nazis, communists, beatniks, and hippies.
And the second thing?
He reportedly told a very long, quite graphic story about an atheist family being murdered. In his telling, the attackers supposedly said to the victims something like, but you're the one who says there is no God, there's no right, there's no wrong, so we're just having fun.
Wow, that's quite an anecdote. And the impact of those CPAC comments.
The sources just note that the statements went viral online pretty quickly after the event.
Okay. So, bringing it all back around then, Phil Robertson passed away May 25, 2025, age 79.
Yeah. And looking back over everything in these sources, it's quite a life story.
It really is. From that incredibly humble start, living off the land, through the unexpected turns, like being a top college QB.
Then building this business empire from scratch, practically, and then becoming this huge reality TV star.
And navigating all that came with it, the massive fame, but also these really significant public controversies.
All while being consistently, very publicly outspoken about his faith and his particular views. It's quite a mix.
So we've taken this deep dive, pulled out the key threads from the sources you gave us, trying to give you that comprehensive picture efficiently.
As you, the listener, sort of process all this information from the sources, what really stands out? What do you make of a life that covered such different ground? The rugged outdoors, sports potential, business, massive fame, controversy. It's a lot.
Yeah, maybe think about the complexity, right?
Right.
When someone's life involves such strong elements of faith, business, and media colliding, how that public platform just magnifies their message, but also the reactions, the blowback.
Right. What does looking at a life like this, documented through these different source lenses, tell you about how we understand public figures and how we navigate all the information swirling around them today? Something to think about.